class next week with Myron. But today we have a speaker who's got his hands in a lot of things. Let me tell you a little bit about Greg. He's written 3 books, and he's got like 3 coming, I think. Seriously, 4th is in the can, and he is a blogger, therefore an author, a speaker. He's from Charlotte, North Carolina. He's a husband and a father. He's got a great family. He is actually, the coolest thing about him right now, and there's a lot of cool things. The coolest thing right now is he's putting together the first ever First Impressions conference. It's not going to be a gathering where you go to a city. It's just going to be online. So anybody can participate in this from right where you are, May 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. So he can tell you more about that. But that's a thing he's got going. Here's his latest book. I want to tell you about this. Secrets of a Secret Shopper. What he's talking about today is in book form. And what he's sharing today will actually just set you up to read this, I think. You're going to want to get this book. I actually ordered some from Amazon, but not in time to get them here today. Sorry about that. That's my fault. But we will have some. If you really want one of the books that are coming, just hit me up afterwards, and we'll get one of these for the low price of whatever I paid on Amazon. And then beyond all of this, the books and the speaking and the conference, Greg has a real heart for ministry leaders, for churches, for pastors. One of the other things he does is a nonprofit that is aimed at burnout, people that are burning out or have burned out and are outside doing ministry right now. So he meets with a local church leader in his town every single day of the week for lunch or dinner or coffee or whatever, because he loves the local church and he loves ministry leaders. So that's my favorite thing about him, is that, because we share that heart at Nebraska Christian. So I'm really excited to have Greg with us today. Please give an institute welcome to Greg Atkinson.
Thank you. No, really, thank you. No, that's great. I actually was here 5 years ago at the Institute and spoke, and ever since, for the last 5 years, I have been an ambassador for Nebraska Christian College, because what is happening here is incredible. I get the privilege of speaking at schools, colleges, and seminaries all around the country, but I've never seen anything like what happens at NCC. And I don't say that everywhere I go. I tell them about NCC. What is happening here is incredible. It's one of the most relevant and practical programs I've ever come across. And so love the people here. As he said, my name's Greg. I've been married for 22 years. I have 3 teenage kids, not too far apart from some of your ages. My oldest is 17, and actually this week we'll be touring her 4th college that she's looking at. And so time flies. And so I have 2 drivers in my house. But I love the local church. I love church leaders, pastors. My heart is for building into the Big C Church and the kingdom. And I've written some leadership books, but my last one kind of dives a little bit further into the niche of first impressions and guest services and hospitality. And my hope is that years from now, somebody will look back and say, I can remember when that wasn't even a thing at a church. For those of you that are familiar with a communications director at a church, there was a time where it was the secretary put together a bulletin, and that was all that happened. Now there's actual full-time communication directors and communication departments, and there's all kinds of stuff happening. And so that's a thing now at a church, is a communications director or a children's minister. And so my hope is that fast forward in time, every church will have a first impressions director, whether they be volunteer, part-time, full-time. And so at the end, I'll tell you about a Facebook group that I have where these people gather and talk about this every day. But as Andy said, I wrote a book, Secrets of a Secret Shopper, and we're not going to dive into all the chapters today because, as he said, he ordered some copies, and I know that you could read it, and I don't want to read it for you in advance. But here's kind of a breakdown. We talk about online presence, social media and church website, parking, first impressions, the sense of smell. You would not believe how powerful the sense of smell is. And every business, department store, restaurant you go into have scent machines pumping out smells to help you stay longer, shop more, spend more. The sense of smell is powerful. Somebody comes into your church and they smell mold or bleach, they're not coming back. If they smell coffee or citrus, it's like, and they can't put their finger on it. They don't walk out of there saying, that smelled like bleach. They just walk out there and, I didn't like it. I didn't like it. They cannot put their finger on it, but it's a subconscious thing. And I go into a whole chapter on that. Signage for you communications folks. Children's ministry for those of you passionate about kids. Security is a big deal nowadays in the church. The worship service, any worship leaders in here? We dive into the worship experience. Keeping it real, that's for lead pastors. How many lead pastors are here? We're going to dive into keeping it real, being genuine, authentic, and then finish strong. And part of that, just give you a brief overview, is you don't want to just have greeters that at the door saying, good morning, welcome. You want them after the service saying, thanks for coming, see you next week. It's the complete experience from beginning to end. And so we're going to talk about finishing strong. Today, what I want to talk about is my passion. If you want to see me get fired up about first impressions and hospitality, it's about the why. Why does this matter? Too often, church leaders will start with the what. I need you to stand at this door. Okay, well, let me go to my post. It's just the what. I need somebody in the parking lot. And we don't start as leaders with the why, casting a vision. This is why this matters. When you stand and open this door, this is what it means to that person, to that guest. And so today, we're going to dive into the why, and you'll get to hear a little bit of my heart. This is actually in Secrets of a Secret Shopper. This is the introduction where I give kind of a biblical case for hospitality. And so you guys are familiar with the golden rule: whatever you wish that others would do to you, also do to them. The great commandment, Jesus pretty much summed up everything. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it: love your neighbor as you love yourself. And so all throughout Scripture, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, there's a biblical mandate to love others, to serve others, and care for others. And so I like to be as interactive as possible. I don't want to just stand here and be a talking head. I really want to hear from you. I really do. And we're going to have some Q&A at the end that I'm looking forward to, because I'm actually, I really enjoy it. I'm actually at my best to just get pop questions of something I wasn't planning on. What do great churches have in common? Just say a couple things out loud. Great leaders? You know that's my favorite word, intentionality, which is literally my favorite word. Coffee. So there's a lot of truth to that. Initiative. We talked about that this morning in a class. So I have the opportunity of traveling all over the country consulting with churches. I've been doing church consultations for 10 years with about 200 churches. And this is what I find: the churches that are exploding with growth, that are vibrant, that are healthy, that are just busting at the seams, they plan for and expect guests. They plan for and expect guests. The churches that I have been the most impressed with have designed the entire experience for the first-time guests. Everything from beginning to end, street to the seat, parking lot, all the way to the pew, everything is designed for the guest and welcoming them, helping them feel at home. Every Sunday is somebody's first Sunday. Now, depending on the size church you may have, it may be every Sunday could be somebody's first Sunday. But a lot of churches, every Sunday is somebody's first Sunday. I was a campus pastor at a local campus of about 175 people, and we averaged 6 to 8 guests a week. It was a 175-member church. We averaged 6 to 8 guests a week. Every Sunday is somebody's first Sunday. And so what that means, this is something I want you guys to really pray through and think about, and that is the one-day principle. This Sunday at your local church could be somebody's one day. That day where they encounter the living God. The day where their life is changed for eternity. This could be their one day. If that person came to your church today, what would you want them to experience? And there's some things that go along with this concept. When you interact with a guest, there are three things that I want to touch on just really briefly. But first, I want to share this story about this man, the beggars, one day. And so I want us to read this together. One day, Peter and John were going up to the temple at the time of prayer at 3 in the afternoon. Don't you love when the Bible points out stuff? You know, everything there is there for a purpose, but they let you know what time it was. There was a time where Jesus was speaking. It says he asked them to sit down in the grass. Well, why did he say that? Why do we have air conditioning in churches? It was something very, very important that he asked them to sit in the grass, something comfortable, something just. There's cool things in Scripture that you wonder, why is that there? So a man who was lame from birth was being carried to the temple gate called Beautiful, where he was put every day to beg from those going into the temple courts. When he saw Peter and John about to enter, he asked them for money. Peter looked straight at him, as did John. Then Peter said, "Look at us." So the man gave them his attention, expecting to get something from them. Then Peter said, "Silver or gold I do not have, but what I do have I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, walk." Taking him by the right hand, he helped him up, and instantly the man's feet and ankles became strong. He jumped to his feet and began to walk. So let's look a little bit closer at that. We look guests in the eyes. I'm going to give you a sneak peek into some of the largest and fastest growing churches in the country. I could name some churches that practice this, and you would know their name. This is what they do, and this is why they excel at it. They look guests in the eyes. Acknowledging a person by simply looking them in the eyes expresses respect, interest, appreciation, and understanding. I was talking with Monty last night about the power of eye contact, looking somebody directly in the eye. You're going to need to do that as leaders. We speak positive words. That's verse 6. Using encouraging words can have a life-changing effect on the person who hears them. We focus on individuals. Treating guests as individuals helps them feel like they are part of the community, not lost in a crowd. And so when I'm serving at my local church as a greeter, I look each person in the eye. Welcome, good morning, welcome, good morning. When I can, I try to remember names. It is very important to allow people to know their worth, their value, that you respect them, that you care about them. And so eye contact is huge. This is stuff that you pass on to your volunteers of the why and why this matters. Don't just tell them stand at the door. Tell them why it matters and what they are doing there. And that this whole little part right here is that today could be somebody's one day. So preparing for guests. How many of you ever have company over to your house? What do? Clean. What else? Make food, put away the laundry, sweep, mop, vacuum. Sometimes you put on a nice candle, a little scent, make some refreshments. The point is you prepare for them. And so something I've said often over the years is company is coming, are we ready? Company's coming, are we ready? Somebody is going to visit your church for the first time this weekend. Are you ready? Are you ready for them? So what is hospitality? I like this definition that I want to take the time just to read it. This is from Henry Nouwen. Hospitality means primarily the creation of free space where the stranger can enter and become a friend instead of an enemy. Hospitality is not to change people, but to offer them a space where change can take place. It is not to bring men and women over to our side, but to offer freedom, not disturbed by dividing lines. Andy Stanley talks about removing obstacles, removing barriers, making it easy for people to encounter God, removing any distraction out of the way so that they can focus on the message and hear the gospel. I key in on this though. This is my jam. This is something I love. Hospitality is not to change people, but to offer them a space where change can take place. Pastors, you can work all week on your message, but if the first 10 minutes is a bad experience, their mind's somewhere else. Their mind's somewhere else. And so let's offer them a place where change can take place. Why does hospitality matter? Well, to me, and I talk about this in my book, I think it's a biblical mandate. I think that we find this in Scripture from the Old Testament to the New Testament. In Leviticus, the Bible talks about welcoming the stranger. Sometimes it's translated welcoming the newcomer. This is from Old to New Testament, welcoming the stranger, welcoming the newcomer. Jesus talks about, for I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. Jesus modeled hospitality. When we welcome the newcomer and the least of these and treat them as valued guests, we welcome Christ himself. Hospitality is a qualification for a pastor. Have you ever really thought about that? If you read Timothy and Titus, you can't even be a pastor or elder without being hospitable. It is one of the qualifications. I've seen people over the years glance over that, and they'll point out all the other qualifications. I was at a church one time where a pastor was preaching on Titus, and he kind of made a joke of, he was going through the list, and he said, be hospitable. He said, ain't nobody coming to my house. Like, you're like, that's cool. I love you guys here, but don't come to my house. And I'm thinking, man, I have people at my house all the time. That's the mark of a Christ follower. It is a qualification as a pastor. It's a biblical mandate. So all throughout Scripture, Romans 12, contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. 1 Peter, be hospitable to one another without complaint. Hebrews, let brotherly love continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers. Where did we hear strangers earlier? Just a second ago. Leviticus, welcome the stranger. I was telling a pastor I met with the other day about the line of grace. It was Myron who's speaking next week. The line of grace that goes from Old Testament to New Testament. He's preaching a series where he's going to talk about people that think the Old Testament God and the New Testament God are two different gods, and the Old Testament God was just angry. I can show you passage after passage in the Old Testament where you see the grace and goodness of God. It's the same theme all the way throughout. And from the beginning in Leviticus, welcome the stranger, to here in Hebrews, do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers. The Bible is full of this concept. It is a biblical mandate. It is what marks us as Christ followers. So when I get passionate about first impressions and hospitality and guest services, it is not about, let's make sure we have greeters, let's make sure we have ushers, let's put somebody in the parking lot. It's not that. It's just be a Christ follower. Operate with the fruit of the Spirit. Let's love and show kindness and goodness and gentleness. Let's care for people. It is a lot bigger than having a greeter at the door. Showing hospitality is one of the primary signs of a Christ follower. So when we are the stranger, when is the last time you visited a church? How many of you have a home church here locally? When is the last time you went to another church? You don't have to answer, just think about it. What did you experience? Was it awkward? Were you nervous? Were you intimidated? Were you lost? What was it like? My friend Mark Waltz, who is speaking at the First Impressions Conference, he literally wrote the book called First Impressions. He says, you've got 10 minutes. Somewhere between the parking lot and the children's center, the 10 minutes pass. Listen to this. They should know they matter to to us, before they hear how much they matter to God. Pastors, I say it again, if your whole entire focus, I was just reading about this on a book on the plane here, if you think it's just the sermon, they need to know they matter to us. Then we can tell them they matter to God. But you'll never get through that barrier of the heart if they don't know that you care about them. And so this is the thing I hear the most pushback. I speak on this all over the country, and I've written about it, I've blogged about it, I have Facebook groups, and the one pushback I get over and over and over is, just preach the word. Just preach the word. Some of you are sitting there thinking, just preach the word. I want to know, since there's a lot of ministry folks here, who can very quickly, very concisely, in about 60 seconds, come up here and share the gospel with me? Who can? The gospel, just give me a quick explanation. Come on up. Is that John? Is that right? John, come up here and just share the gospel. About 60 seconds, just explain it to me and tell me what I need to know.
To you or to them?
To me.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the gospel teaches us that in the beginning, God made the world perfectly. Okay, I see what you're doing. So in the beginning, God made the world perfectly. Yeah, hey, how's it going? God made the world perfectly, and man broke that relationship with God. So after man broke that relationship with God, God gave us the opportunity to be made right with him through his son.
That's good. That's good. Thank you.
See you later, sir.
I'm saved now. No, so here's the deal. Pastors, you can preach the word all they want, but if you've blown it in the first 10 seconds, they're not listening to you. They're not listening. If your children's ministry is not clean, safe, and secure, they're worried about their kids. And they're thinking, should I go check on them? Should I go check on them? Are they okay? Are they safe? If we blow it when it comes to first impressions and hospitality, it never, they don't, and it's not the whole, the word of God does not return void. It's not that. It's that they are not physically listening. Now, if they were listening, then yes, boom, penetrates the heart, absolutely. But if they're distracted and they're looking around and they're thinking, I got a weird feeling, or these people didn't talk to me, or this is so awkward, or they made me stand up and they called attention to me and I'm embarrassed. I can't believe this is happening. The sermon's going on, but all this is going through their mind. That's why you have to be careful with just preach the word. Just preach the word. Yes, preach the word. We want to preach the gospel, absolutely. But if you blow it when it comes to first impressions, they're probably not listening. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Okay. Because the reality of a guest is that they're skeptical, they're fearful, they're anxious. Churches every week, we talked about they have guests. They come in fearful and skeptical. And when we welcome them with open arms, when we show unconditional love, when we are hospitable, that kind of breaks down that wall of defense. It puts them at ease of, okay, this isn't bad. It's not as bad as I thought. This is actually pretty cool. Oh, I didn't know they were going to do music like that, and I didn't know. Wow, okay. Well, they were really welcoming when I walked in, and it kind of calms their heart so that they can listen and receive the good news. And so, children's ministry, I said it earlier. I did a podcast with Rich Birch about this. Clean, safe, and secure. Clean, safe, and secure. If your children's ministry is not clean, safe, and secure, your parents are going to be worried. They may grab their child and leave. They may not focus on the service, and they probably will not come back. There's a whole chapter on that in my book, and so I'm not going to go into it. But this all comes back to you've got 10 minutes. You've got 10 minutes. Pastors, how many of you preach 10 minutes into the service? None of you. You've got 10 minutes. And then after that, what takes place is what takes place. And so they should know that they matter to us before they hear that they matter to God. John, by the way, I know that was an awkward thing. Thank you for sharing the gospel. Love you, man. So I wrote this article for Christianity Today called The Cringe Factor. And I want to tell you just briefly a little bit about it. This is what happens when your members, your loyal leaders that are bought into the vision, invite a guest to church. So when I was a campus pastor, I was mentioning to Monty's team last night, every week I would say, we need you to reach into your circle of influence, your friends, family, neighbors, coworkers, classmates. Invite them here. We'll tell them about Jesus. We will not embarrass you. We'll tell them about Jesus. You just bring them here, invite them here. So when they do that, and they step out, and they've been building a relationship with their neighbor for the past year, and like, hey, would you be my guest this week at church? Yeah, I'll come. I'll come. When they come, that's when the cringe factor starts. Your congregation member wants everything to be perfect. The cringe factor has set in. They're thinking, oh my gosh, please be good, please be good, please be good. Please don't preach on tithing today. Please don't preach on tithing today. This is what your people go through, and they're thinking, don't let Bob be a greeter today. Don't let Bob be at the door. He's gonna shake their hand too long and talk too long. And then they come in and are like, please, somebody come over and say, hey, we're sitting in the auditorium. Please, somebody just acknowledge them and say, hey, how are you? They are cringing. They're thinking, okay, we got kids. We got to get them checked in. I hope it goes smooth. I hope it doesn't take forever to do the registration and get the kids signed in. And they are cringing. And this is a message I preached on at my church in Missouri, our partnership in the gospel from Philippians. We have partnered with our people. You invite them, we'll tell them about Jesus. Now, can they tell them about Jesus? Absolutely. But a lot of times they bring their friends to church to hear the good news of the gospel. And so when they do that, our end of the bargain is we should not embarrass them. We should do everything in our power to remove barriers, remove distractions, remove anything that could take their mind away so that they don't have the earbuds in and they're looking around and they're distracted so that they can hear the good news of the gospel. This is some values that I love. People, excellence, honor, respect, love, compassion, grace, and hospitality. When you lead and when you lead and serve at your church, you've got to put yourself in the guest's shoes. Put yourself in their shoes. What do you experience when you drive onto your parking lot? What do you experience when you walk through the door? What do you experience when you sit down in the auditorium? I just did a podcast with Carrie Newhoff where we talked about the worship service. And when I walk into your church, is the band up on stage still practicing? Am I watching a rehearsal before the service? What do people experience? What is it like? What is the communication style of the pastor? Is he mean and angry and banging the pulpit? What is it like? What do they experience? This is the $1 million question. This is the question. If you weren't on staff, would you attend your church? You want to be awake at night, wrestling with something? If you weren't on staff getting paid, and you could go anywhere you wanted to in your city, you could go anywhere you wanted to go, would you attend your church? You have to answer that. You have to wrestle with that. This is a vision statement that I love from my friends at Crosspoint. Crosspoint Church is a place where everyone's welcome, because one of the things we've learned is nobody's perfect, and with God, we believe that anything's possible. No matter where you've been or what you believe, you're welcome here. When I first came across their vision statement, their mission statement, I thought, man, if I'm in Nashville, that's where I would go. That's where I would go. That's the church I'd want to attend. Everyone's welcome. Nobody's perfect. Anything's possible. Hospitality is a mindset and a posture. We should want and desire to serve others, to live compassionate, caring, loving, grace-filled lives. It's a mindset. The problem I have with people that take the hard stance on just preach the word, is they are turning a blind eye to love and grace and hospitality, which the Bible, as we have already covered, clearly explains all about the biblical mandate of hospitality. And so it's a mindset, and my book will help you kind of think through some of that stuff. There's a lot of other books. Read Mark Waltz's First Impressions. There's a lot of great books that help explain the why, but it's a mindset. Are we ready? Remember earlier I said, what do the great churches have in common? They plan for and expect guests. This is important. I know you guys come from different backgrounds. I said this on the first podcast I did with Carrie Newhoff. Excellence transcends. I don't care what style you are. I'm not up here saying you have to be a modern worship, elevation worship, rock band church. You may have pipe and organ. You may have choir and orchestra. You may be Church of Christ, a cappella. Doesn't bother me. I consult with all churches. What does bother me is it done with excellence? Is it done with excellence? Excellence transcends. I have worked with every size, every style, every denomination, and excellence stands out. Personally, I don't go to a church with a choir and orchestra and pipe organ, but if I'm going to visit one, I want it to be done well. I want it to be done well. So excellence transcends. Your task as a leader, we talked about this last night a little bit, share stories of life change, celebrate the win. A lot of this I got from Andy Stanley, sharing stories of life change. When you do an offering talk, when you do a giving talk, come up there and tell them where their money is going. Hey, when you give, and you guys are a generous church, when you are generous with your finances, we were able to scholarship 20 kids to summer camp. We were able to give to this local food bank. Let them know, share stories. I think, Monty, did you say you had somebody that came to Christ last week at your church? So I was saying this week, celebrate that. Make sure everybody knows. Guys, did you know last week somebody came into a relationship with Jesus Christ? Yeah, celebrate the wins. Create advocates. I could do a whole other talk. Actually, one of the speakers at the First Impressions Conference is covering this. He has a session called Creating Raving Fans. But Bill Hybels, years ago, I was at the Evangelism Conference at Willow Creek. This was in the year 2000, 18 years ago. I was at the Evangelism Conference at Willow Creek, and he said the success of Willow Creek, which was even then a very, very large church, can be attributed to one thing: people inviting people. People inviting people. Anybody that's studied marketing knows that the biggest, most successful form of marketing is word of mouth. Word of mouth will always be the best form of marketing. People inviting people are how churches grow. However, going back to the cringe factor, if you embarrass your people and the service is put together sloppy and there's rough transitions and people don't know what they're doing and the worship leader's up in there, are you starting this? Who's next? Are you? If it's a disaster, people aren't going to invite people. They're not going to do it. When you do things with excellence, excellence transcends. When you do things with excellence, people start inviting people, and that's where you see some great stuff. Last night, we talked about momentum over dinner with some friends. Momentum is a series of little wins. Little wins. Never embarrass your people. Remember the cringe factor and fight for excellence in all areas. And this is easier when you do less. I could do a whole other talk. Monty and I talked about last night, less is more, and the whole simple church model. I don't have time to dive into that. What I want to talk about very briefly, in just a few seconds, is something that God kind of put on my heart a few months ago. So often when we talk about first impressions, it's about the first impression of our church. We need people in the parking lot. We need greeters. We need ushers. We need people. This is that you get one shot. You only have one chance. You get one chance to make a first impression. We need to make sure that everything's great so that they come back to our church. Yes, however, this may be their first impression of Christianity. This may be their first impression of Jesus. This may be their introduction into the Christian faith. So think about first impressions holistically. When people encounter your church, if they're judgmental, if they are frowning and they don't have eye contact and they don't pay attention to them, they don't look at them, they don't feel loved and cared for and welcome, that could be their first impression of Christianity. Every Sunday, somebody's first Sunday. Somebody's going to come to your church that's lost. And how you treat them, how you welcome them, what happens in the first 10 minutes is their first impression to Jesus, to Christianity. And so think of that. Pray about that. This is the why before the what. The leader's job is to cast vision. When you gather together with your volunteers, and I would encourage you to do a huddle in the morning before. Let's say you have a 9:30 service. At 9 a.m., you should be huddled up together, praying together, holding hands, looking around the room, saying, today's the one day. Today's somebody's one day. Remember earlier we talked about the one day? This could be the one day that changes their life forever. Today is somebody's one day. Let's get fired up. Let's love people. Let's smile. Let's welcome. Today is somebody's one day. And so casting vision, always point people to the why more than the what. Don't just give them a post and say, I need you at this door. Tell them why it matters. Why do we have people at the doors? People can smell fake. Be genuine. They can smell fake. Serve people. Remember the golden rule and the great commandment that I started with. Remember the cringe factor. When somebody comes to your church, it is a spiritual decision. It's a big deal. When they come to your church for the first time, whether they realize it or not, they have made a spiritual decision. Also, God is at work. God's already at work. He's drawing them to himself. And so when your guest invites somebody, they want it to go smoothly. They are praying and praying and praying for their family member or coworker or neighbor. They're praying. And so you partner with them. Never embarrass your people. Partner with them. Remember the cringe factor. Pastors, if you want to experience this, build relationships with your neighbors and those you come in contact with. Get to know lost people. Every pastor should know lost people. Invite them to church and see how you sweat. See how you think through what you're preaching on. See how you coach your worship leader. I need you to be on point this week. I need you to bring it. I need your A game. Go through that anxiety that your people go through. We want our people to invite people. Remember Bill Hybels? That's how churches grow. We want people to invite people, but we got to remember to never embarrass them. And so be kind, be gentle, be caring, be loving, be hospitable, love well, serve well, welcome all. And so I want to give you just a quick way to get in touch with me. If you have something to write on, my website is gregatkinson.com. My secret shopper site is worshipimpressions.com. The conference that we mentioned is going to be online in May, where you can learn from the best thought leaders in North America, peers of mine that I greatly respect, authors, consultants, practitioners, pastors, leaders I reached out to and said, would you please be a part of this conference? That's firstimpressionsconference.com. And then I interact with people. It's hard for me to spend one-on-one time with everybody, but I have a Facebook group with about 6,000 people in it, and I interact and comment and start discussions in there every day. Every day we talk Sunday. Every day we talk about the weekend. And the easiest way to find the Facebook group is just to type in guestservices.church. Please remember that URL, guestservices.church, and join me on Facebook, and we'll talk about Sunday every single day. There are people from every size church all around the globe in that group, every denomination, every size, from 25 people to 25,000. They're in the group, and we talk shop. It's fun. I even got my number up there if you want to text me or ask me a question. My email is just my name, greg@gregatkinson.com. Every Sunday is someone's first visit. Company's coming. Are you ready? And so I'm excited right now. I hope we have time. Do we have time for some Q&A? I wanted to hear from you guys, because I don't want to assume that that I know exactly what you guys, the questions that you bring to the table. So I want to answer whatever you have.
Yeah, cool. We don't always poll the audience, but we will today. So actually, I'm going to put our sound folks on the spot and get a couple of mics, and I need a couple of students to grab those mics and be willing to run those around. Thank you, Brody. And yep, sounds good. And so I'll start off with a couple, and then we'll get you guys some mics and ask some questions. So be thinking, get ready. This is a great chance. Greg, thanks too for just being available and putting your number up there. That's really generous of you, and I hope you guys will take advantage of that. My students should be taking advantage of that network opportunity and that closeness to a church leader, so don't forget to reach your hand out afterwards and meet Greg. Let's cover the conference real quick before we get into the questions. You mentioned it, but I want them to hear a little bit more about what you're actually going to be doing there.
Yeah.
It's a satellite deal or whatever. It's like online, right? But
yeah.
What's going to get covered there? Who's going to be there?
Good question. Thank you. So the First Impressions Conference, our little tagline that we've been using is, if it happens on a Sunday, we cover it. Everything that it takes to pull off a Sunday. I got asked last year by an executive pastor, hey, we just hired somebody to be over First Impressions. what conference should we send her to? And I was speechless. I said, there isn't anything. I've spoke at various conferences, a breakout on first impressions, but there was no conference dedicated to just this. And so we're going to cover it all. We have preachers touching on vision and preaching and sermon prep. Some people have spoke here. We have stuff for small churches, church planners. We have a worship breakout, a children's ministry breakout, an assimilation breakout, a security breakout, a communications breakout, an online presence and social media breakout. You name it. If it happens on a Sunday, we cover it from the street to the seat.
How do you sign up for a breakout if it's online?
So good question. Good question. It's all included. So it's just we started internally using the term panel because breakout was confusing. So it's not you don't have to pick and choose. You watch it all. So it's not like if you're attending the children's, you can't be in the worship. You see all of it. If I could go back in time, we would have not used the word breakout. Yeah. But you get to watch it all. It's a 3-day conference. You can download the videos, show them to your team, watch it on demand. And so if you get together with your children's volunteers, you could say, hey, let's watch this children's ministry breakout panel discussion and discuss it with them. If you're a worship team, say, hey, let's get together with our worship team and watch this discussion. Or you could have a day where your staff gathers around a table like this, and you watch it on a screen, and you watch the entire 3-day conference.
Yep. First annual. We're going to do this again.
Won't be the last.
Yeah, and if you get the all access pass, you can do it. You can just watch it whenever you have on-demand access. You can show it to your team if they can't be there. So it's going to be really, really great. Let's just tease a little bit more on this before we go to the audience here. What's the most often the mistake made most often in kids ministry, like in the kids area? What's the one thing? Like give us the thing most churches probably need to pay attention to that they aren't.
Yeah. So sometimes people kid me because I'm repetitive and redundant, but I say things over and over to make a point. I mentioned, what do great churches have in common? They prepare for and expect guests. One of the worst things I see when I work with churches is a bottleneck when it comes to first-time kids check-in. There's like a line of people waiting because it's not efficient. It's not flowing smoothly. And so you've got people that are just like tapping their feet, and they're waiting and they're waiting. And guests show up 5 minutes before the service, and they're standing in line at 11 a.m. and they're like, I got to get through. So why is this taking so long? They don't understand that we background check people. They don't understand that we have security protocols in place. They don't know what it means to get a sticker and to check out their kid with the sticker. They don't understand all that. Now, you could help them explain all that with an I'm new page or a what to expect page on your website. You could explain, here's what's going to happen. You could have a subheading that says, what about my kids, ? And you tell them what the experience is like. And be sure to arrive 15 minutes early. You can preemptively explain all of this on your website. But I have seen parents frustrated in line because it is taking so long. I worked with a church in Florida in January that had a line of 20 people backed up waiting to pick up their kids after the service. The service was over, but there was a hallway, and I took a picture of it and showed it to the pastor. There was just a long hallway of about 20, 25 people waiting in line to pick up their kids because it wasn't efficient.
Yeah, good. Let's go ahead. If anyone's got a question, raise your hand. We'll get you a microphone and we'll ask it. No one's willing yet. I got questions. If no one's willing yet, we can talk about some more stuff.
There we go.
Okay, there we go. Corey's going to be brave.
Okay, so I feel like you've been talking a lot about the main service sort of church. How would this apply to something like youth ministry? Is it like the exact same, or are there a couple things that you would do differently?
Good question. So a lot of the student ministry that I know, they too have first impressions. You greet people, welcome people. A lot of them have a check-in. I've seen students that print out a sticker and they have name badge, and that's how the church tracks attendance. They know who checked in, especially large churches I'm thinking of, but they check in. So there's the efficiency bottleneck thing. They check in, they don't necessarily check out, but they check in. And we sometimes have people at the door waiting and greeting. They have worship, they have preaching. It's a very, very, very similar. There are some, different things that that are not identical to a Sunday morning main worship service, but a lot of the principles apply. And if you heard anything today, what I am advocating for is biblical hospitality. Love people, serve people, care for people, welcome people. Doesn't matter if you're in children's ministry or youth ministry or doing outreach and missions or putting together a Sunday morning experience. We should love and welcome and serve others. There are there are a number of ways that applies throughout our Christian faith. It's a mark of a Christ follower to be hospitable.
One thing I think that youth ministries miss a lot, we talked about yesterday. So talk about the principle of the intensity of density.
Yeah, that's good. Man, I'm glad we get to, I love Q&A. So a lot of churches, this is a discussion. You guys have got to check out this Facebook group. We talk about this kind of stuff every day. But somebody asked the question, should we rope off seats? And I said, yes, absolutely. Some of the greatest churches I know all over the country rope off seats, and they have pipe and drape that cover up parts of the room. I go to Elevation Church in Charlotte, giant church, but when you walk in, all you see is a small portion of the seats available, and everything is pipe and drape, and it's roped off, and they crowd them in because there's, I talked about momentum. Momentum it fuels high morale. Churches that are booming and growing, which is stuff that Rich Birch could talk about all day long, that flywheel. When churches are exploding, they have high morale and high momentum. And when you're in a packed room, there's something exciting about it of, man, it was packed. There wasn't a seat left today. And so in reality, at Elevation, we could have pulled back the pipe and drape and opened up another 1,000 seats. It just depends on the service and the service size. You and I were at a church yesterday where they had just enough seats out for the people there. They could have added in more seats, but they didn't. It's the intensity of density. And so if you have an auditorium of 300 seats and 100 people come, it's going to feel bad. You're going to look around and be like, man, nobody's here. It's morale's low, momentum's low. It's like, there's nobody here. Whereas if you have an auditorium of 300 people and you've made 100 seats available and it is packed, you're like, wow, this is the place to be. Like it is. And so in a lot of student ministries, you may meet in a main auditorium, but you have 50 kids. And so bringing that down with pipe and drape and closing off seats. I was on staff at a church where the students met in the main auditorium, where we had a giant auditorium, but we had a small youth group. And so we would section off stuff and have everybody sit right in the middle of the center section. So that applies whether it's student ministry or Sunday morning, the intensity of density. Rope off a lot of seats. And this, I know it's tough. This takes strong leadership. I know it's tough because people are going to complain and say, why can't I sit over there? I've always sat over there. I get that. But the intensity of density, and what I'm sharing is I've had the privilege of seeing up close some of the largest and fastest growing churches in the country. And Carrie Newhoff, Rich Birch, they could all tell you, this is the dirty little secret. I wouldn't say dirty, that's bad. This is the little secret. This is the secret that people don't talk about, is the room is shaped. Life Church, Craig Rochelle, they do this in an amazing way. The room is shaped in such a way that it feels packed. And the next week, when more people come, they open up a little bit more of the room, and it feels packed. And then as they grow, they open up a little bit more of the room, and it feels packed. Two examples, intensity and density. One, Craig Rochelle pastors the largest church in America. If you haven't checked out Life.Church, check out Life Church. If I was in school, I'd be keeping an eye on them. Life Church, he said they will never build an auditorium larger than 750 seats. Now, last week on Easter, Life Church had 138,000 people in attendance, but their auditorium seats 750 people. And they don't care if they have to do 5, 6 services a weekend. They're going to pack them in, the intensity of density. And the best example I've seen, how many basketball fans are here? So I grew up North Carolina Tar Heel fan. Tar Heels in the house, yes. So obviously, theologically, that means I hate Duke. So now, now the thing is, I have been to the Dean Dome in Chapel Hill and watched the game, and it's a giant arena. But the success, the secret, the key to Duke is when you come to Cameron Indoor Stadium, which is purposely small. People have begged Coach K to build an arena, and he won't do it. They call them the Cameron Crazies. You get in there, and it is so electric, so exciting. People, I don't know if you've heard about what Duke students go through to get into a game. They actually camp out. There's a place called K-ville where they all have tents set up, and they're camping out to get a chance to be entered into a lottery to win tickets to the game. Like, you have to camp in a tent and enter a lottery and see if you get picked to go to the game. Could he build a 20,000-seat arena? Absolutely. Will he? Nope. Because he has the home court advantage. When you come to play Duke, it is hard to win at Duke. It's a big deal when North Carolina beats Duke at Duke because you have come into their world, their house, Cameron Crazies, and it is intensity of density. And so whether you look at Craig Rochelle or Coach K, there's a principle there that I hope you take away. And all that being said, I know it's hard. I know people don't like to have their seats roped off, but there's wisdom there.
You might need to have a few key conversations with those people before you rope off the seats.
Absolutely.
Get them on your team first.
Let me touch on that real quick.
Okay.
I've met with pastors ever since I got here Saturday, and I shared this in the Facebook group. The best way to interact with me is in the Facebook group, guestservices.church. But I shared this. Every leader needs to communicate in 3 main ways: large group, small group, one-on-one. Large group, small group, one-on-one. Some things you say from the stage. Some things you say to a small group of leaders and volunteers. And some things you look one-on-one and say, I need you to be on board with this. We're making a change. I need you behind me. I need you behind me. And so if you just roll out one Sunday, try to hardly ever blindside your people. Don't blindside them. But if you have had these one-on-one meetings of, we're going to start using pipe and drape and shrinking the size of the auditorium, and you go to your key influencers and longtime members and movers and shakers, and you look them in the eye and say, I need your help getting this through. And then you meet with your volunteers, your lay leaders, and you say, here's what's going to happen, and here's the why. Remember, the whole talk was the why before the what? The why of hospitality. People respond to the why. So as you're casting vision, here's why this matters. Here's what this could do. Then large group, that's when they walk in one Sunday and the whole auditorium has changed, and they're like, oh, wow, this is different. But when people complain, you have a group of people who have your back, Side note, if I was doing a leadership topic, don't ever make a decision alone. Don't ever make a decision alone. You should have the full support of your leadership team, where everybody's in agreement. So when something negative happens or somebody gets upset, they don't say, well, that was Greg's idea. They would say, yeah, we made that decision. That's something we made as a team. We fully support that. We decided that.
That's good.
Don't be a lone ranger.
Yep, that's good. Next, anybody else with a question? Yes, sir, Mr. Norton there.
What is your thought on turn and greets, specifically like an extended turn and greet where the person from stage says, hey, introduce yourself and talk to the person next to you for 2 minutes about subject that we're going to give you? I
missed the very first part. What is your thought about, what was the word?
Turn and greets.
Turn and greet. So
turn and greet.
In the service,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm used to hearing meet and greet. Okay, yeah. So we discuss this every week in my Facebook group. I'm telling you, you need to get in my Facebook group. But we've had great discussions about this. Here's what I would say about that. One, let's not put God in a box. I've said for years, it takes all kinds of churches to reach all kinds of people. Some churches, it really works. Some churches, they don't do it for a variety of reasons. But when I say don't put God in a box, sometimes people say, well, that's old school. That's 90s. We don't meet and greet anymore. We don't just turn around and shake hands. Well, at Elevation Church with Stephen Furtick, one of the largest churches in the country, one of the fastest growing churches in the country, if you watch him online, he'll say, hug 7 people, high five 5 people, turn to your neighbor and say, every week, they're the fastest growing church in the country. So I say that to say, should you do it? I don't know. That's for you to decide. But don't put God in a box and say, that's not cool. Nobody does that. Yeah, they do that. But there's some churches that don't do it. I don't have an issue either way. Personally, I like the time where it makes the church feel more like family and community, and so we turn and we greet. However, everybody's different. My wife doesn't like that. My wife's an introvert. She would rather not high five 5 people and hug 7 people. That freaks her out. But at Elevation, if you come visit Elevation in Charlotte, you'll see all these people hug, high five, going around, and it has not stopped their growth. And so we can't put God into a box of people don't do that anymore. You can't sing a hymn in a modern church. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Don't put God in a box. But I don't have an issue with it.
Yeah, good. Yes, sir. I'm going to microphone back there. Thank you, Brody.
In your experience,
You're in the Facebook group, right?
I am in the Facebook.
Are the discussions good?
They're awesome. They're awesome every day. Great conversations. I end up using it quite a bit, and I've actually referred other pastors to that group in this area as well.
Thank you.
No, in your experience, what's the best way to collect guest information? Our church uses a self-identify model, and it's frequently a point of frustration for me in terms of making the numbers match in terms of guests that I see versus guests that I can actually have the ability to follow up with.
Yeah, I've talked about this on a couple podcasts. And in the Facebook group, I'm a real big believer in the connection card or connect card or information card, whatever you call it. And I think where I think a lot of churches miss the mark is instead of they'll come up there, a lot of times they forget to announce it. I've gone and consulted with churches, and I did one recently, a traditional Baptist church, and I said, do you guys not use a connection card? Because nobody mentioned a connection card. And they said, oh yeah, it's in the back of the pew. And I was like, oh, I totally missed that. Like, nobody said, look in the back of the pew. One of the things that I say all the time, never assume people know anything. It is the reason we have signage in a church. Never assume people know anything. Oh, everybody knows where the auditorium is. Everybody knows where the restroom are. No, they don't. Never assume people know anything. And so our job as facilitators and leaders and pastors and shepherds and those that are passionate about hospitality is to make it easy for them so they don't have to guess and they don't have to wander lost. And so all that to say, I think a connection card is a great way to say, hey, this is why I wanted to show tangibly, hold up. If you're a first-time guest here, we would love for you to fill out your connection card. You can find it in your bulletin, or you got one on the way in, or they're in the back of the pew. We would love for you to fill this out. We're not going to show up at your house. We just want to send you some information about the church, let you know we're glad you're here, or we have a gift for you on the way out. A lot of churches do that. But call attention to it. Physically hold it up and say, you got one of these when you came in. And there's a whole other process of assimilation that's a different discussion, but I love the connection card. Some churches use a digital connection card, but a lot of people may not respond to that, and it's a little harder of a sell, but giving them a tangible physical connection card to fill out is great. By the way, yesterday I was at Myron's church, and Dylan did the welcome and held up the connection card, and he did an excellent job. And I tried to encourage him afterwards. He did a really good job. He said something I have never in all my years heard before, because you just heard my passion for hospitality. We're all about welcome guests, welcome guests, welcome guests, welcome guests. So Dylan said, hey, if it's your first time here, we would love for you to fill out a connection card. And if you're returning, are you excited to be here today? And I've never heard anybody say, and if you're returning. It's always guests, 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 guests. but he just, in the passing, threw in, and if you're come back, aren't you glad to be here today? And I was like, well, I'm going to say that wherever I go from now on. I'm going to steal it. I'm going to make it mine. I'm not going to give credit, but it'll be hashtag Greg Atkinson. But no, that was so good because I am a both-and guy. Let's go hardcore after the guests, but let's not make our members feel second best. And so just that little, and if you're returning, aren't you glad to be here today? Man, I've never heard that, so big props.
On this topic, what's your thought on counting people?
Yeah, we talked about that last week in the group.
Not that you should or shouldn't count people, how you count them.
Yeah, that was a discussion last week. Have y'all heard about my Facebook group? Have y'all heard about? We started 5 months ago, and we have 5,600 people in it. It's exploding. And so last week, somebody asked about counting. The largest churches in the country with thousands and thousands and thousands of people count heads. I'm not a fan of pass the attendance clipboard. I don't like that. A lot of churches do that. I don't like that. What I do like is to have somebody in the balcony looking down, or sometimes you'll have some ushers that stand in the back and they count each section, left, center, right. They count each section. But you should be counting. That's the only way you know what's working or not working. And it allows you to have metrics year after year. For example, I talked with a pastor recently who said, we're up 30% where we were this Sunday last year. I was like, that's awesome. That's awesome. The only way you know that is to know how many people you had last year. And so each year when you have these landmark services of, wow, we had 800 people at Easter this year. We only had 500 last year. You only know that by counting. But I think the best and less obvious way is just to stand in the back and to count. And I've seen all kinds of people that have like the seats that they fill in, or people that just count the tally. But please count. Please count.
But yeah, so make it as subtle as possible because we don't want people thinking, oh, they're counting.
Yeah, subtle.
Right?
Now, good example. I've seen it all. 200 churches. So I was in a church one time. And I was sitting in the middle section. I always sit towards the back so I can see everything. And I was sitting in the middle of the back, and there was a left section and a right section and an aisle. And this usher goes all the way down to the front, and he's going around. And I'm sitting in the back looking at this usher thinking, what the heck are you doing? Like the pastor's up there preaching, and he's in front of everybody counting. Stay in the back. If you have a balcony, use the balcony. Look down. Oh, by the way, a little secret that people won't talk about. These giant churches, they have a 360 camera in the ceiling. They have a camera that looks down, and they count from a control room, a video control room, where they're seeing the layout of the auditorium, and it's all done via video camera. And that's not, most churches can't do that, but they do count people. But subtle's the key. Yeah,
you don't want to make people feel like I'm a number. That would be against the hospitality whole thing. So you've shot yourself in the foot there. We got to wrap this up. It's
Rick
1:30.
Warren says we count people because people matter to God.
Every number's a person. It's real good. Hey, would you just mind closing us in prayer, praying for our churches and for our city?
Yeah.
That'd be great. Greg, thanks.
God, I thank you for those that are gathered in this room, for the families, the homes, the ministries and churches they represent. I thank you for the willingness to come and learn and to grow and to be challenged and to be stretched. I am not naive enough to think that everything I said people agreed with 100%. I pray that you would filter out anything that is not of you. I pray that you would allow some things to take root, some things that they could take action steps on and go back and discuss with their team. God, I pray your greatest blessing upon them and their lives, their family, and their ministry. I thank you for the stories I've heard about Omaha and the churches uniting together and coming together, a great model for churches around the country. I thank you for what's happening here. I thank you for the ministry that is taking place and the lives that are being changed for eternity. And I just pray that you would be with them as they lead and guide and serve each and every week. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Let's thank Greg one more time. And we'll see you back here next week from Myron Pierce.